Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
It's been no deal talk this week as far as Brexit's concerned, but some farmers are aware that with or without a deal, any change to immigration could be significant for them. You might have seen the latest migration figures yesterday that showed there was a small net exodus of Central and East Europeans in the latest 12 months. We'll hear more about immigration this autumn, I expect, with a report expected on the UK's migration needs post-Brexit. But farms say they're struggling to find enough migrant workers for seasonal jobs like picking, planting and pruning. And that's not just the Brexit effect either. Helen Thomas went to find out what British agriculture thinks it needs.
A classic English scene: rolling hills, laden fruit trees, and a gnawing sense of anxiety.
If we get to a no-deal scenario where we crash out, that is making me lose sleep at night, because this sector will have no means to recruit next year.
The apples from Stocks Farm in Worcestershire end up in Tesco and Aldi. Its hops go all over the world. But it, like other farms, has been finding it harder to recruit the migrant workers it needs.
The number of people wishing to come has declined significantly. The age of the people wanting to come, we used to be able to attract young English speakers who were keen, often graduates. That's changed completely. Last year there was 100 bins of apples that we ended up just not being able to pick in time. With a gala apple, the skin goes greasy and then we can't sell it. And 100 bins of apples that should have gone to the supermarket for a Class 1 sale ended up going for juice. The cost to the farm was in the region of £30,000.
This isn't just about Brexit. Until 2013, the UK had a seasonal agricultural worker scheme allowing British farms to hire people from outside the EU. Since then, stronger economies in Eastern Europe and a weaker pound have made it harder to attract EU workers. The industry wants a new scheme as soon as possible.
Every other European country has the ability to bring non-EU workers to do these jobs. So the Germans are bringing in Ukrainians, the Portuguese are bringing in people from Thailand, the Spanish are bringing in Moroccans. And the reality is that there aren't enough people living within Europe that want to do this type of work.
A year ago, the industry was hopeful that there was political support for a seasonal worker scheme. Now, despite positive noises, nothing's happened and nothing appears imminent. The government says it's waiting for a report from the Migration Advisory Committee, due this autumn, that it wants evidence-based policy making. But there's a problem. According to experts, official statistics on short-term migration don't really exist.
The UK agricultural sector relies on as many as 80,000 migrant workers, mainly from Eastern Europe, to do short-term jobs like picking each year. The National Farmers Union says the sector is about 10% short of workers for this year to June, slightly worse than 2017. But farms are approaching a key pinch point, when workers who arrived early in the summer start to go home, and as the last of the soft fruit picking overlaps with top fruit like apples and pears. In September 2016, the sector was 11% short of workers. Last September, it was 29% short. This year looks as bad, if not worse. In certain regions like Scotland, Newsnight has been told that some farms are 50% short of staff. The first agricultural worker programme started in response to post-war labour shortages.
Volunteer workers have come from the towns to help the fruit farmers in their task.
But migrant worker numbers grew rapidly from the 1990s. The government suggested that EU freedom of movement should be enough for the sector, perhaps until the end of transition in 2020. It's left recruiters scouring the continent for new workers.
Whilst we can only recruit workers within Europe, we have gone to countries like Moldova, where it's a very small population, but large numbers of the population have Romanian or Bulgarian passports. They can come and work in the UK.
Work is also underway to try to find new non-EU markets that could supply labour.
I was in Ukraine in March this year and I met with 4 universities. These are agricultural students who really are interested and passionate about agriculture, generally who speak pretty fluent English and who want to learn new skills, come and help with the harvest in the UK, to go back and to get their degree.
One criticism is that a sector scheme ties workers to farm work, rather than leaving them free to choose jobs in hospitality or logistics, say.
What would you say to people who say, you know, the way you solve a shortage of workers is to pay more, to improve conditions, to improve standards?
We've done a really good job in agriculture of improving conditions, of improving pay. You've got workers earning maybe £12–15 an hour for what is essentially a harvesting job. It's just not attracting people to do it. In the UK, Concordia brings over about 10,000 workers a year. This year, to the end of July, we had 2 British applicants.
Local fruit for local produce. A new worker scheme will be needed sooner or later to keep British apples available for fruit bowls and juice bottles. But a new programme could take at least 6 months to put in place, leaving next year's crops still in jeopardy.
One response to the industry's concerns is that longer term the sector could adapt, either by using more technology, which in the case of fruit picking could be 5 or 10 years away, or by growing less labour-intensive crops. Either way, where agricultural workers come from in the future could affect the cost and the choice of homegrown produce.
It's probably not a coincidence that there's been an expansion in the amount of labour-intensive cherries and asparagus grown since EU accession in 2004, when there's been more labour available. Now, some people would say that's an excellent thing. Other people would say, well, they grow perfectly nice strawberries in France, we can import them from there. At the end, it comes down not so much to a technical economic calculation about how many workers we need, but actually some of these more emotional or political decisions about whether things ought to be grown here in the UK or whether it's fine to import them from abroad.
At Stocks Farm, there's a question mark over what was 10 acres of apple orchard.
We would normally have ordered trees by now, ready to be planted either next spring or the spring after, but fundamentally we don't know where our labour is going to come from, and we've got to the stage now where that uncertainty means that this £250,000 investment, which is what it will be, is on hold.
Another summer has almost been and gone, and the farms are still waiting.
Helen Thomas.